I call this the waters of Meribah and the rivers of Babylon. Oh, Neil's joining us. See, it was worth waiting.
Oh, excellent.
You should sing the song, Vaughan.
Sing the song.
I think we should sing the song.
Oh yeah, but Waters of Babylon, definitely.
Yeah. Sing the song, yes, exactly. And I just thought, I mean, in a sense, this is all part of the creation season. And I just picked up anything about water in the Bible. It's a bit arbitrary, it's a bit random. But if we focus on 2 Psalms tonight, and we look at other little passages that relate to the Psalms. The first one is Psalm 95, and the second is Psalm 137.
So Psalm 95, it's page 561 in the New Revised Standard.
561 in the version that we're using.
Yeah.
And so if we read that,
by we you mean me. Okay.
Harley's
Fine.
there.
Here I am. Hello. Okay, I will read Psalm 95 out loud, and the rest of us will read it.
Can you hear all okay? Are you okay?
Yes.
Good.
Great.
Ollie.
Okay. O come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let us come into his presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a joyful noise to him with songs of praise. For the Lord is a great God, and a great King above all gods. In his hand are the depths of the earth. The heights of the mountains are his also. The sea is his, for he made it, and the dry land which his hands have formed. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, and the sheep of his hand. O that today you would listen to his voice. Do not harden your hearts as at Meribah, as on the day at Massah in the wilderness, when your ancestors tested me and put me to the proof. Though they had seen my work, for 40 years I loathed that generation and said, they are a people whose hearts go astray, and they do not regard my ways. Therefore in my anger I swore, they shall not enter my rest. Ooh.
Okay.
Can't enter the God's rest. That's not good.
Yeah, well, we'll come to that. It's a very interesting last line. Okay. I mean, it's a psalm that's got sort of 3 parts to it. Verses 1 to 5, 6, 7, and then the last line of verse 7 and 8, 9, 10, and 11 make 3 different sections, and they kind of they sort of progress, and they say different things, really. So the first 5 verses, let's focus on the first 5 verses first of all. What are your initial thoughts when you read that? I mean, what is interesting, I think Walter Brueggemann makes this point, this is often what nonconformist ministers would say in their call to worship at the beginning of a service, Oh, come, we'll sing to the Lord.
Very familiar.
Very familiar. Yep, very familiar.
It's interesting, I haven't looked at it in detail, but verse 3 implies that there are other gods. It's just that Yahweh is greater than those. Yes. It sounds as if it's still at the stage where there are a load of gods. The other nations have got their gods, but Yahweh's the best rather than Yahweh's the only one. at this stage.
That's right. And what do you think might be the context for the psalm? How do you think where do you think the psalm might have been used?
Well, again, I should know this, but I haven't got any notes on in this version. But is it one of the songs of the ascents?
Yes, I mean it's
Jerusalem.
Yeah, so it's in the temple in Jerusalem, and part of a procession. You know, you could imagine them singing it in procession. Come, let us sing to the Lord. Let's make a joyful noise. I think some of these psalms you can sort of imagine, you know, because we're too seemly, you know, we're too nice, and I think the crowds of people going into the temple would not have been so polite, and the music would have been more exciting than anything you get in a congregational chapel.
Yes, yes,
even with our musicians, you know.
yes, we do tend to massacre the psalms.
And the idea there, I think, is that they're crowning God.
Oh,
It's coronation of making God the king above all gods.
Mm.
So you're sort of crowning God, God as creator.
Why do you think the sea is mentioned here?
Well, I think
Why?
it's everything, isn't it? In his hand are the depths of the earth, the heights of the mountains, the sea, the dry land, everything.
Yeah.
It's the whole of creation is there. So in a way, that first 5 verses are about affirming, you know, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, as the best, but also the creator of everything. So there's nothing more than that, is there? I mean, there's nothing bigger than this God. You know? What about then the second 6 and 7? Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand. It's the same sort of pattern, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Come and worship, and you know, so it's still part of this procession, but the role of God changes from the first. It goes in verse 7, we are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand. So that's more about the covenant and the relationship of Israel to God. So the first is God is the creator. In the second, you know, God is the redeemer.
And verses 1 and 2 and 6 and 7 go together with 3, 4 and 5.
Yeah.
Focusing on God, and 1 and 2 and 6 and 7 focus on our response to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you've got the parallel there. You know, the parallel of the focus on God, the coming, the worship, but then you've got the reason. You know, it's a summons and a reasons. You know, and come, and then why do you come? You come because God is creator. You come because God is the protector of Israel. This is the God above everything, but also he's our God.
In the children's Bible, sorry, it says, on verse 7, he's our God, and we are the people he takes care of.
Right. It's
That's nice.
It's nice, isn't it?
That he tends. That's children for you.
That one somewhere. Like our children have that when they were very small.
So
yeah, no, yeah, I like that very much.
Just Neil seems to be struggling again.
Neil, are you there? Or
No,
it's not actually in, is he?
no. It's fine, whatever. I'm sorry, everyone.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, there. So then we move on to the last part, and this is this is rather different, isn't it? It kind of moves into a more prophetic, you know, kind of statement. And this is why I think I wanted to choose this psalm. Oh, that today you would listen to his voice. And I was just thinking, I mean, can you think of something really absolutely central in the Hebrew Bible, really central statement that would link to that? Oh, that today you would listen to his voice. And I'm thinking of Deuteronomy chapter 6. You know, hear, O Israel.
Oh yes, of course. Yes.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is.
Yes.
Yeah, etc. etc.
Yes.
Shema Israel. So that requirement, that fundamental requirement of the Hebrews, you know, is to listen to God. Deuteronomy chapter 6, isn't it? Verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Keep these words that I'm commanding you today in your hearts, etc. So the hearing and the listening is crucial to the whole concept of the Torah, the law. Then do not harden your hearts as at Meribah, as on the day at Massa in the wilderness, when your ancestors tested me and put me to the proof, though they had seen my work. For 40 years I loathed that generation. Isn't that incredible? They are a people whose hearts go astray, and they do not regard my ways. Therefore in my anger I swore, they shall not enter my rest.
It says I haven't understood my ways in the Children's Bible, not just listening, hearing, but understood. That's quite important, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it, isn't it? I mean, if you listen, you understand. I mean, but then this idea of the hardening of the hearts as at Meribah, and that's what we should look at here. What happened at Meribah? Does anybody know?
Not off the top of my head.
It happens. I mean, it's mentioned twice actually. The story is in Exodus. There's a shorter version of the story, and there's one in Numbers, in the book of Numbers. In Exodus, it's the place that it happens is called Massa Meribah, and in Numbers it's just the Meribah that was talked about. And some people think there might have been 2 episodes, but it doesn't really ring true. I think if the story is so similar that there's probably just one kind of incident that took place as the people of Israel were coming from Egypt, and they were wandering around the desert. So if you can turn to Numbers chapter 20, you keep your finger in Psalm 95. So just keep your finger there and turn to Numbers chapter 20. Verses 1 to 13.
Numbers. Early on, no.
Early on, yeah.
That's page 145. No, 144. It should be 144. Should be chapter 20 for New Revised Standard.
144.
For this one.
Yeah. Page 144, Jean.
Quite close.
Chapter was it? Sorry.
Yeah, have you got it?
What chapter was it?
Chapter 20 in Numbers.
Verses, was it?
1 to 13.
Shall I read?
Are we ready?
Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah.
The Israelites, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. Now there was no water for the congregation, so they gathered together against Moses and against Aaron. The people quarreled with Moses and said, would that we had died when our kindred died before the Lord. Why have you brought the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness for us and our livestock to die here? Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to bring us to this wretched place? It is no place for grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink. Then Moses and Aaron went away from the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting. They fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take the staff and assemble the congregation, you and your brother Aaron, and command the rock before their eyes to yield its water. Thus you shall bring water out of the rock for them. Thus you shall provide drink for the congregation and their livestock. So Moses took a staff from before the Lord, and he had commanded, as he had commanded him. Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock. And he said to them, listen, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock twice with his staff. Water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their livestock drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust in me to show my holiness before the eyes of the Israelites, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. These are the waters of Meribah, where the people of Israel quarreled with the Lord, and by which he showed his holiness. Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king.
That's it.
Oh yes, 13.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so that's what's being referred to in Psalm 95. This is, it says, they shall not enter my rest. And because of the incident that took place here, the people who are of that generation were wandering around the wilderness there, alongside Moses and Aaron. They didn't enter the promised land. They weren't allowed to do it because of what happened here. And there's this sense here, do not harden your heart, as at Meribah. So, those ministers who read verses 1 to 5, and comfort everybody when they come to church, are missing out on that second part, which is about third part rather, which is about obedience, and that if you do come and worship and so on, there's a kind of there's something that's involved with that.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, what did Moses and Aaron really do wrong?
Yes, I was trying to work that out.
And I don't know, what did they do wrong? What happened? The people complained because there was no water. There was no water. It's not unreasonable of them to say, okay, you brought us here, but where's the water? Well, are we going to die here?
It's interesting because I can see in the Psalm, it speaks about your ancestors testing me and put me to the proof. I can sort of see that to a certain extent in Numbers 20, but I can't see specifically, as you say, what Moses and Aaron did wrong, because what else could they have done? Unless they're taken as responsible for the attitudes of the people, which seems unfair, but that's the only thing I can think of, that they're regarded as responsible for the people's lack of trust in God.
I mean, it is a kind of puzzle, you know, but the only two people who came into the promised land were Caleb and Joshua. And Joshua was seen as a person, you know, inspired by the Spirit, and Caleb was just a nice man, I think. I can't remember what he did, but I mean, they acted as spies, didn't they? And they came back, so they were rewarded for behaving well and doing the good things. But I mean, there's various kind of theories, ideas that have been mooted over the years. One is that they struck the rock twice. So they didn't believe it the first time.
Right.
That sounds a bit strange to me. The other is that they were ignoring the needs of the people while they were mourning for Miriam, who, you know, in the first verse she dies, Miriam dies. Another is that they claimed that they brought the water. You know, shall we, what does he say? Listen, you rebels, shall we bring water for you out of this rock? When actually they didn't. It was God who brought the water out of the rock. And maybe that kind of assumption, and this I think goes, if we are going to link it to the climate justice kind of thing, is this assumption that we have the power to do all this stuff and not actually, you know, look at where the source of the water is, where the thing comes from. I actually think it, just as an aside, but in Psalm 95, I think it's really interesting that the psalm begins, let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation, and then makes the reference to the incident in Meribah where the water comes from the rock. So the salvation is coming from the water and the provision of water. I always think it's really interesting. The other is that Aaron and Moses are portrayed as priests in Numbers, and they had just perhaps had contact with the dead because of mourning for Miriam. Again, I'm not sure if that's a terribly credible explanation. But this idea of the people quarreling with God and doubting God being the cause for their not entering the promised land. But now in the psalm, it's the reason for their not entering into the Sabbath.
We all have doubts all the time, don't we? Can't always say that we believe everything actually happened. We've got doubts and questions, and that's a good thing.
Yes, it is. But this it is the kind of really this kind of sense of their hardness of heart, this lack of trust, and this quarreling, and therefore not entering into the rest. Which is death. No rest, no Sabbath. So, you know, Moses is not allowed to enter into the promised land. Entry into the promised land is dependent upon obedience, you know, and so on. This in the book of Hebrews, We don't need to look at it, but in the book of Hebrews, I think chapter 3, I think chapter 4, he quotes this psalm quite extensively and links it to the beginning of Genesis chapter 2, with the Sabbath. And the author of Hebrews is saying that, you know, actually it is unbelief that is not allowing us to enter into the Sabbath, into the rest.
Neil's trying again.
Neil is trying.
He's trying.
Neil is trying.
Hello, Neil.
Oh, Neil, you've succeeded.
You've succeeded. Hello, Neil. You've succeeded.
Were you having?
Good
I was
see you.
having technical issues and all sorts of things. So
Oh,
anyway,
Well,
I heard a lot of what you've been talking about.
oh,
Which
good.
is,
Sue was trying to get in, but was asked for Sue Armitage was asked for a passcode.
Oh,
Wow.
oh. So Armitage was trying to get in as well. Okay, so I mean, where does that leave us with that psalm? I mean, it's I don't think there's a satisfactory answer as to why poor old Moses wasn't able to what they did wrong, but it's certainly taken up, I think, in quite a few places. In this incident is spoken about quite a few places in the Bible as being quite significant as to why the people of Israel did not get that promised land in the way that they wanted. In a way, it makes me wonder whether or not this is also the kind of transition from the story of liberation, the Exodus story of liberation, which then moves into a story of occupation with Joshua. And that the people are being freed as slaves. They wander around in the desert. Things don't go right for them. They rebel, and then they enter the promised land, but they do so as occupiers. And so that kind of transition in the story, I think, may well be, this might be one of those kind of pivotal moments in that story where the liberator is no longer able to take people forward. And that relationship between the rock and water and salvation, that moment where creation gives the people to save them, I think is also quite significant.
And arguably, when we use Psalm 95 as the call to worship, we should end on the last line of verse 7 rather than before that.
Yes.
Because that's that's actually quite a relevant ending to it, really, rather than just the worshipping bit. But
yeah. Oh, that today you would listen to his voice, I mean, and in a sense, that is the pivotal point of the psalm, actually. Oh, that today you would listen to his voice.
I mean, it's interesting because in the new RSV, or certainly the version I've got in front of me on the screen, that last line is separated off with the last section. I would have personally kept it with verse 7, because then it keeps it as that's the whole point of what it's saying. It's sort of, when it separates it and puts it at the top of verses 8, 9, 10, and 11.
Yes, it doesn't mind.
It doesn't, I don't think that's as effective as keeping verse 7 intact.
Well, whoever put the numbers on thought that.
Yeah, but obviously new RSV compilers didn't.
Yeah. There you go. Should we read Psalm 137 now? More water.
More
water. This is a great psalm. I mean, it's.
Oh, I know what's coming up.
Yeah, it's very, very it's very unusual psalm, you know, in that it's a lament, but not quite following the same pattern as other laments, but it's a community lament of some kind for the loss of Zion, for the loss of Jerusalem.
It's Boney M, isn't it?
Hmm?
It's Boney M, isn't it?
Yeah.
Boney M,
Yeah.
yes, okay.
Go on, Neil, sing it to us.
No.
Go on, go. You can.
Yes, but
Harley has no idea what we're talking about anyway.
I know
It's
who
yours.
Boney M is. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Would you like me to read it?
yes, please.
And I apologize in advance for verse 9.
Okay. Yes, okay, great.
Yes.
What's it?
By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down
Verse
and there
9. Verse 9
Thank
is
you,
is
sorry.
dreadful. The worst line in the Bible, probably.
Oh, sorry.
Verse
Oh.
9, the worst line in the Bible.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
Sorry, I
Let me
started
do-
being- I started too soon.
oh gosh, yeah.
By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and there we wept when we remembered Zion. On the willows there we hung up our harps. For there our captors asked us for songs, and our tormentors asked for mirth, saying, "Sing us one of the songs of Zion." How could we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither. Let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy. Remember, O Lord, against the Edomites, the day of Jerusalem's fall, how they said, tear it down to its foundations. O daughter Babylon, you devastator, happy shall they be who pay you back what you have done to us. Happy shall they be who take your little ones and dash them against the rock.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's in the Psalter, you know, I mean, it's for use in church. They put this in brackets, you know, because
Yeah.
you know that the rule is that you don't say in a service, you know, words that are so difficult and so offensive. So you miss them out. But it's a psalm in 3 parts again, you know, verses 1 to 3, and then 4 to 6, and then 7 to 9. So 3 verses in each section, and we sort of know the context. The rivers of Babylon. We know where they are.
They're in Iraq.
Hmm?
Or is it Iraq?
Yes, I mean, yeah, exactly. In Babylon, I mean, and in Babylon, they have this system of irrigation. So they built canals between the Tigris and the Euphrates. And you know, in the first verse of the book of Ezekiel, he says that he's with the exiles, with the exiles by the river Chebar, which was one of these irrigations. So we know that it seems the people of Israel who've been taken as exiles were put into forced labor alongside these irrigations, with these irrigation canals, which used to silt up, and the forced labor people would have to clean out the mess, you know, and so on. And maybe also that they would also have their exiles would also worship alongside the water banks because of the need for purification and ritual purification before worship. So we know where they are, and we know that there's a homesickness in that lament. We remembered Zion. On the willows there, we hung our harps. And then there's this tormenting, you know, sing us one of the songs of Zion. And that so in a sense, it's not at all an untypical experience of the refugee.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
or the foreigner, you know, in another country, and that can be benign sometimes. I mean, we do it. I mean, I used to, whenever I read this, I kind of curl a little bit at the number of times, you know, you want to have somebody sing a Latin American song for an event that you've organized or whatever, you know. And you know, I mean, there's this kind of even if it's benign, it's this kind of, you know, treating people as if they're kind of cultural oddities, you know. I remember somebody saying to Musashi, would he sing a Japanese Christmas carol, you know? And you know, we don't have any, you know. But yeah, so that's where we are, and the first few verses, the first three verses are, and fourth verses are, you know, first person plural. They are we. How can we sing? You know, we sat down and wept. But it changes in verse 5 to I. If I forget you, O Jerusalem. And you can sort of see the parallel there, you know. If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither. And what do you do with your right hand? You play the harp. And let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. You know, if the tongue clings to the roof of your mouth, you can't sing a song. So, you know, there's the psalm is moving down there. But there's something in this about memory and the importance of memory. And memory as a, if you like, almost tool of resistance.
Yes.
But then we come to the problem verses, the period, the verses from 7 to 9, which are, you know, very, very problematic, I think. Does anybody else find them problematic?
The only thing I would say is that we've got the luxury of finding them problematic in the sense that if we were in Ukraine now, I wonder if we would find them so problematic. They might describe how we feel, even if we felt feeling like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
And same thinking about the Jews at the time of the Holocaust. Again, you might feel I shouldn't really be feeling like this, but this might be how you were feeling. So at least the violence here is described. It's not commended. It's not like some of the passages we find where God appears to be violent. Here it's actually relating the human instinct for violence.
Yeah.
And I don't think and maybe it says something about how God understands that, not that God commends it, or God agrees with it, or we should agree with it necessarily, but that God understands it. And maybe it's a way inviting us to try and understand it.
I mean, in the, you know, just looking at some of the historic background as we know it from other parts of the Bible. I mean, you know, Edom. You know, what did Edom do? I mean, they. I'll just read you some verses from the book of Obadiah. No, it's something else, isn't it? Obadiah. Okay.
yeah, go for it, Lloyd.
But this is it. The vision of Obadiah. Thus says the Lord God concerning Edom. We have heard a report from the Lord, and a messenger has been sent among the nations. Rise up, let us rise against it for battle. I will surely make you least among the nations. You shall be utterly despised. Your proud heart has deceived you, you that live in the clefts of the rock, whose dwelling is in the heights. You say in your hearts, who will bring me down to the ground? Though you soar aloft like the eagle, though your nest is set among the stars, from there I will bring you down. For slaughter and violence done to your brother Jacob, shame shall cover you, and you shall be cut off forever. On the day that you stood aside, on the day that strangers carried off his wealth, i.e., when the Babylonians invaded, and foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, you too were like one of them. You should not have gloated over your brother on the day of misfortune. You should not have rejoiced over the people of Judah on the day of their ruin. You should not have boasted on the day of distress. You should not have entered the gate of my people on the day of their calamity. You should not have joined in the gloating over Judah's disaster on the day of his calamity. You should not have looted his goods on the day of his calamity. You should not have stood at the crossings to cut off his fugitives. You should not have handed over his survivors on the day of his distress. So you can see that they had a beef against the Edomites, you know, and a very recent one, you know, that when the Babylonians invaded, actually they took advantage and they supported the Babylonians. They stole stuff, they looted Jerusalem at the same time, and it says here, you should not have, at the crossing, to cut off his fugitives, you should not have handed over his survivors on the day of distress. So there's a big beef going on here, you know, in that at that time. I'm just wondering whether it's I mean, and also I think just to, you know, Jeremiah describes, you know, the events that took place. I'll read just a little bit of that. I mean, it's quite long, but I'll read you some of what was going on at the time.
Jeremiah what?
Jeremiah 52.
Page 773.
Perhaps don't need to read it all, but it's a lengthy description of the destruction of Jerusalem. Zedekiah will
52 on page 773.
Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, just as Jehoiakim had done. Indeed, Jerusalem and Judah so angered the Lord that he expelled them from his presence. Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. And in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, on the 10th day of the month, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came with all his army against Jerusalem, and they laid siege to it. They built siege works against it all around. So the city was besieged until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. On the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine became so severe in the city that there was no food for the people of the land. Then a breach was made in the city wall, and all the soldiers fled and went out from the city by night, by way of the gate between the two walls by the king's gardens, though the Chaldeans were all around the city. They went in the direction of Arabah, but the army of the Chaldeans pursued the king and took Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho, and all his army was scattered, deserting him. Then they captured the king and brought him up to the king of Babylon at Riblah in the land of Hamath, and he passed sentence on him. The king of Babylon killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, and also killed all the officers of Judah at Riblah. He put out the eyes of Zedekiah and bound him in fetters, and the king of Babylon took him to Babylon and put him in prison until the day of his death. In the 5th month, on the 10th day of the month, there was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Nebuzaradan, the captain of the bodyguard who served the king of Babylon, entered Jerusalem. He burned the house of the Lord, the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every great house he burned down. All the army of the Chaldeans who were with the captain of the guard broke down all the walls around Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried into exile some of the poorest of the people, and the rest of the people who were left in the city, and the deserters who had defected to the king of Babylon, together with the rest of the artisans. But Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, left some of the poorest people of the land to be vine dressers and tillers of the soil. So this is the background, you know. I mean, it's a very violent, very. I mean, you know, as you say, Peter, if you're in Ukraine now, you might understand what all this is about, you know. And if you read all of that, you get why there's this intensity of anger and this need for retribution in the psalm. And there's something else that's really important here, that the common practice in the ancient world, when you captured a people, was to kill the children. The reason being that you actually then destroyed the next generation. So you stop the survival, and there's various examples of that told in various parts of the Old Testament, just passing by, you know, and then they killed all the children. So, and you remember the famous, you know, killing of the firstborn of the you know, and in Bethlehem, you know, Herod. So you actually, you know, you cut off the next generation, and that's in this. So when it says, you know, happy shall you who take your little ones or your children and dash them against the rock, it's actually really, you know, the message is we want to stop this oppression, we want to close this, you know, whatever. And you've got, I mean, here it says, remember, Lord, against the Edomites. In Hebrew, it's the sons of Edom. Then you get, oh, daughter Babylon, and then you get your children in verse 9. So you get, you know, that family thing there. So what it's really saying is that, you know, we want this oppression to end. We want, you know, these people, you know, not to have, you know, inheritance in future generations. But I think, Peter, you got on to exactly the right thing. Who is seeking retribution in this? Who is taking the revenge? God, the people are not. That people are not doing it. What they're asking is for God to understand.
Yes.
You know, asking for God to understand why we're so angry, and asking God to end, you know, that oppression by stopping the generations of people. It's still pretty ugly. It's still pretty ugly, but I think it's too easy just to say how terrible. You know, you've got to kind of enter into that experience as to why people have got to that point and why they're saying these things, you know, before you can pass easy judgment, as you said, Peter, from a very comfortable position.
What I do think is important too is that we don't ignore it. I suspect if we said it in church, we'd probably miss out the last verse. And in a sense, that's the most important verse of the lot, because it's precisely the one that's going to disturb people. And isn't it better for us to discuss it and talk about it openly than for people to go home and look at it and think, oh.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And it's like you know, last Christmas, for you set the challenge of wanting a massacre of the innocents in a carol service. You know, which was a big challenge, but working with it and then trying to find a way to do it. The Christmas story works better with that there. There's an integrity in the text that we don't have the right to take it out, even if we don't like it. We've got to talk about it. We've got to say why we don't like it. And otherwise we don't face these things, do we? And then we never move on.
Yeah.
I'm struck, Vaughan, I don't want to throw us on another tangent, but I don't know if this is relevant, and if not, then please, you know, ignore it. But I'm just struck by the fact that it seems to me in Psalm 137, it starts in the past tense, it goes into the present, and then it goes to the future. you know, and the past is, this is what we did before. We don't want to do that anymore because it's rubbish. How can we do this now? There's nothing we can do because it doesn't work. And this is how we feel about the future.
Interesting.
Yeah. And what is the powerful thing, I think, you know, because what's happening in the present is memory, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, in a sense, there's how important is memory and anger, you know, when you are in a very powerless situation. Because, you know, I mean, this is absolute grief, you know. You know, they're in exile, they're refugees, they're being made fun of, they have no power, they've lost all the power, they've been through a very, very traumatic experience. But they have got memory and they've got anger.
And it doesn't go.
And it doesn't
They've
go.
got no choice.
Yeah.
No choice.
And if I take it on a completely parallel tangent, but think about all the stories of sexual abuse that are coming out, and all this questioning of, well, why didn't they say anything at the time? They had no choice. All they could do was sing the song that they were told to sing. But the memory doesn't go away, and the abuse stays, and ultimately there's retribution that's wanted, rightly or wrongly. It's what's stored in the process if the memory isn't dealt with.
And the ultimate irony of the psalm, I mean, the real irony of the psalm is that the question is, how can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? You know, how can we sing? But of course, the psalm itself is a song. They're singing a song about being able to sing a song.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so postmodern.
Yeah.
Of course.
Brilliant song. Well,
But I mean, in terms of, you know, just going into our contemporary context, which is in relationship to everything that's going on. I mean, not just climate change, but war, all of this stuff, you know. We are pretty powerless and hopeless, but it does make you say, you know, actually these things, like talking about the world as it used to be and how it could be, singing songs, you know, reflecting, talking, trying to find new ways of trusting and of being obedient to, you know, to the ways, you know, and actually still seeking, you know, the Sabbath, you know, the place of, you know, of completion of creation. I mean, it says they shall not enter my rest, but the promised land is more than just, you know, Israel, and the promised land is also this kind of Sabbath rest, you know, this kind of completeness of creation, the new creation, all of that kind of stuff. How do we get it, you know? And even though you are absolutely powerless in this, actually holding on and trusting and believing and so on, and making the poetry is not futile.
No. But it's got to be honest.
It's got to be honest, and that's in here as well, isn't it? You know, that and that anger as well. I think if you lose your anger,
mustn't hide from it. We mustn't hide. Got to say it out loud. Can't hide.
Absolutely.
anger is motivating. You know, I mean, if you suppress anger, you know, it leads to depression. I mean, depression is suppressed anger.
Well, that's the description of those first three verses, isn't it? Their depression.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
And giving expression to, you know, what I mean, you know, let's get angry about climate change. You know, justice. Let's get angry about war. Let's say it, you know, and not just kind of turn away or pretend it's not there.
Very easy to get wrapped up in our own problems and our difficulties and just forget about things like that, you know, just push them out of the way. Don't even think about them now. Do that later. Maybe next week when a bit better, a bit better, then I'll think about that sort of thing and do something about it.
Yes.
It doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think even if you find yourself, as we often do, in a situation where actually there's not a lot you can do, you can still, even though you think the little that you can do is so small in relationship to the massive size of the problem, I think that all of these things are not wasted effort. Nothing is wasted effort, and it collectively together, I mean, ultimately this will bring back the change. Anyway,
Even a good thought will do that. Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I hope I haven't depressed you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you
They're
very
great
much.
psalms, aren't they? I mean, they really, and that second psalm 137 is just quite something else.
Yeah. Thanks
And
for opening
they
our
hang
eyes.
together. They hang together with other parts of the Hebrew Bible and the story of the Hebrew Bible.